Okay, let's talk about lack of boundaries. We've been hinting and kind of revolving around this one for a while. I think sometimes with communication, we need to have certain topics, certain ways of communication that we need to set parameters. So this is what it says about lack of boundaries. Failure to establish and respect healthy boundaries in communication can lead to overstepping personal limits, feeling overwhelmed, and inhibiting open and honest dialogue. So what I would compare this to is, so Stephanie, I had to realize that because of the stonewalling, because of the withdrawing, I had to realize she needed time to withdraw. She needed time to process. So about 5 or 6 or 7 years into the marriage, I don't know what it was, we set up this boundary for Steph that in any kind of argument that we were having, even though that I was getting energized and I could go all night, she had the permission to go, I'm done talking about this. I need to be done talking about this. She'll use those words, I need to be done. That's a boundary for us, is like Steph always gets to say, I need to be done. And when she says, I need to be done, we're done. We're done for now. We'll put it away. I'll say, are we good? Are we safe? Everything like that. But I need to be done. And I think that was a boundary for us. Another boundary for us is, like, we don't go after each other. Like, we don't talk about families. That might be a boundary, for people. It's like, we don't go after families. We don't, say like, well, you're like this or who else does that? That's deeply wounding and it's offensive and it's hurtful. So that's another boundary, is like, we just know, like, with that, the comparison game. That's an off limits thing for us, is you're not like this person, or I wish you were more like this person. Those are boundaries. Mm-hmm. What are some?
A couple of ours are, we've talked about avoiding, and we don't do either of these perfectly, but they definitely have been conversation points for Jenny and I. The extreme statements of always and never. We try to avoid those words. That's really always good. And never. No one always does anything, and no one never does anything. And so you never help around the house. You always, dismiss my feeling, whatever. I mean, I'm trying to think of simple examples. So, the silly part about whenever you use those kinds of statements is now you start arguing about the always and the never as opposed to the thing again. So it's just good to try to eliminate those extreme statements because they're not true. And now you're arguing about that. The second is boundary for us is we try our best not to get historical. And so bringing up past stuff. And so,
like grudges and stuff.
Yeah. Or here we are again. You said in year 2 of marriage that you were, just like you to, I remember when we went to my parents' house back in Christmas of 17, it's just bringing stuff up that you've already talked about, or maybe that you've already whatever. And it's just not helpful. And that also is indicative of scorekeeping. And dude, scorekeeping is the fast track to eroding a relationship. If you're keeping track of, they've said this, they've done that, and you're keeping a scoreboard in your head.
There's the Bible talks about love, and love doesn't keep account of wrongs.
Yeah, that's right.
So
is that in First Corinthians 13?
And
keeps no record of wrongs. Yeah, that's right.
So that's scorekeeping. So it's almost like God knew.
Yeah, yeah.
Joanna, what are some boundaries in the Wishart house?
Yeah, I don't know.
Sounds like you have a withdrawal clause along with Steph and I, like a withdrawal where Kevin gets to have some time.
Yeah, and I think some of that too, I don't know that he has like a phrase, but it's more just I've had to become really in tune probably with his just body language and just noticing what some of those moments are. I think for us too, we work really hard to stay united or like to even if that means talking it out or taking a break and coming back to it, like for us both to be united in whatever the thing that we're discussing. And maybe that's so like it, maybe it's like what's the right word? Just like we never want to walk away feeling like one of us has like won. Like that's not the goal. Like the goal is to walk away like both feeling heard and understood with like, how are we going to move forward? And so, maybe that like united in spirit. I don't know necessarily how to call it.
I think there's something with parenting. So like you're united in parenting decisions too. So that's probably a communication boundary too for you guys. Is would you say that like you never take sides in front of the kids, for instance?
Yeah, I mean, we try not to. Like, you know what I mean? With best of intention.
Yeah, no, it's so you know when your spouse is like tiptoeing on that, and you're like, like, hey, let's.
Yeah.
Um,
Or the kids come in and like they've already asked dad for brownies and you didn't know. So like some of those moments. But
your kids are really cute though, so I would give them brownies. So I'm just saying.
Yeah, I feel like it's probably that to make sure that like we're walking away from whatever the conversation was, knowing again, like for me, safety is really important just because like probably just from some of my background and family of origin. Sure. So I think just establishing like, yes, we're walking away united. We're still good. And so like, yes, sometimes verbally communicating that.
So one of your boundaries is we will always end, we're good. Not that language, but another one for us is the kids can't enter our parenting, our marriage conversations. So like Steph and I, we don't mind having disagreements. We usually save knockdown, drag out things for when the kids are in bed, but sometimes you have disagreements in front of the kids. And this might be wrong. There might be psychologists being like, that's not what you should do. But we have disagreements in front of the kids.
I think that's very healthy.
And well,
your kids need to see you fight fair.
That's what we hope for.
100%.
And so like they see us like and they see us get it wrong, but they see us get it right sometimes. And they also see us shift to we're okay.
Yep.
We're okay. But every once in a while we'll be having a disagreement in the car and there'll be a little voice from the back seat that chimes in. And then all of a sudden the eye of Sauron goes to that child and we're like, what? A boundary for us is the kids don't enter the conversations like that. No, this is out of your pay grade.
I like that. I actually like that a lot.
So they're not allowed to enter into mom and dad's conversation. And all of a sudden that will unite us real quick.
Yeah.
Well, we're on the same team on this one.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
You don't contribute. So Jace, anything for lack of boundaries or anything, in any of or both of you, like anything out of all of the ones we've discussed, the conversation or communication killers, is there anything that you want to kind of sum up or lock up?
I would just say that with all these, I mean, every one of these has been present in my relationships, not just with Jenny, but in any meaningful relationships I think I've ever had. Most prevalent with Jenny in a marriage relationship because marriage is what brings it out of you. Probably one of the things I would just remind us of, and even I would say it's one of the best pieces of advice anyone's ever given me about marriage. We went through premarital counseling, and I remember our premarital counselor's name was Phil Howard at the time talking to us about this, and it doesn't, how you hear this when you're engaged is very different how you hear this at 22 years of marriage. One is, early on it's like, yeah, in theory, I understand that. And then at 22, it's like 22 years in, you're like, oh yeah, I felt that. And sometimes the hardness of that. And it's this, marriage isn't designed. Now, okay, I'm going to get some pushback on this probably, but let me explain. Marriage is not designed. God didn't give us marriage for our happiness. God gave us marriage, and marriage is designed for our holiness, to shape us more into the image of God. That doesn't mean, so here's the pushback. That doesn't mean you can't be made more in the image without being married. Not saying that. And that doesn't mean that you shouldn't be happy in your marriage. I'm trying to say, and it's not me. This is what Paul said in Ephesians chapter 5. For husbands, this means love your wives just as Christ loved the church. So here's the model, here's the image, here's the vision of what a Christian marriage can be. Gave up his life for her to make her holy and clean, washed by the cleansing of God's word. He did this to present her to himself as a glorious church without a spot or wrinkle or any other blemish, and said she will be holy and without fault. In the same way, husbands ought to love their wives as they love their own bodies. In other words, there is something sacred that happens in marriage, which is if you let it, it will refine you. It will challenge you. It will bring out the best and it will bring out the worst. And part of moving towards holiness is allowing those rough edges of our character, of our past, of our sin, of all of that to be polished and to be washed away, right? As Paul says it there. Marriage can have that ability. In effect, it's not the only way, but marriage can have that. That relationship can have that. So my point is, let marriage do its holy, sacred work in your life, And one of the ways that happens most is when there's conflict, where there's tension, which there will be, allowing yourself to die to yourself to do some of the things we've been talking about here. Instead of withdrawing, to open up. Instead of getting back, instead of holding on, resentment, you give up willingly for the good of your spouse. I mean, that's how we're made more into the image of Christ.
Yeah.
And that's the
good.
beautiful thing about marriage. That's the hard thing about it, but that's the beautiful thing about it.
Love it. It's worth fighting for.
Yes.